Margaret gave me sleeping tablets. I don't know if they were his or whose they were.
What did you do with those sleeping tablets?
Gave them to Alois. Put him to sleep.
Have you ever heard of the mashed potato killer? That is the creepy nickname Sarah Turrent got, who, ironically enough, shares her name with a heroic nurse from Massachusetts. Sarah had started an affair with a much older man, and she decided she wanted to get rid of her de facto partner for good in order to be with her new lover. How? By poisoning his mashed potato. Her boyfriend's body has never been found, and Sarah Turrent's case remains to this day as creepy as it is intriguing. That being said, let's get into it. Sarah Turrent and Alois Rez's love story began in the early 2000s in Newcastle, Australia. Sarah was just 15 when she met 24-year-old Alois, and the two almost immediately formed a couple. As you can imagine, Sarah's mother was strongly against her boyfriend at first. He was almost a decade older, and he had a talent for trouble. Sarah's father was not far from the description either, as he was a registered offender, but he had left the family for a long time and was not a big part of Sarah's life, even when she was a teenager. But Sarah's mom was not letting it go when it came to Sarah and Alois. Sarah and her would fight every day, her mother trying to convince Sarah to leave Alois, and Sarah urging her mother to see her as an adult who can make her own choices. The fights escalated to a point where Sarah decided to leave home and move in with Alois and his mom, Zonia. 2 years down the line, Alois and Sarah had their first child together. Sarah was not even 17 yet. Sarah and Alois would go on to have 3 more children, all living in Zonia's home. Alois's best friend, Hamish, described him as a good man.
He was the best kind of bloke. He was like a big teddy bear with a rough exterior that wasn't hard to see past.
But Alois wasn't exactly a devoted family man. He was a part of the Rebels Outlaw Motorcycle Gang, a group that proudly carries and uses guns and all forms of violence. With 4 kids and a wife, Alois wanted to leave the gang, but that's not something people are allowed to do. With violence and lawbreaking as the norm, gang members can only run off hoping that the gang won't go after them and take their lives, so as to make sure no secrets are divulged. Sarah and Alois's lives thus became itinerant, moving from town to town to avoid the gang, who kept learning about their location. In June 2012, Sarah's family ended up going 400 miles away from Newcastle, in a small town called Dubbo. Its population around 40,000 people. This was a familiar town to Alois, who was born there, but a brand new place for Sarah and their 4 children. Alois's mom, Zonia, also came to live with them. Their first home in Dubbo belonged to Raymond Roth, an old family friend of Zonia's. Raymond had a son around Alois's age, and the two would play football together when they were kids, before Alois and his mom moved to Newcastle. Raymond was only 51 at the time, but he had just lost his wife to cancer and was leading a pretty lonely life when Sarah and Alois moved in. The young couple and their kids were only supposed to stay at Raymond's for a few days, until they could find a place to rent. This is where things took a turn for the very creepy. Sarah and Alois did find a house they could move into without Raymond, but by then, the 3 were very close friends. Raymond helped with the moving in, with renovating the house, and most importantly, with babysitting, as Sarah and Alois were looking for jobs. Raymond became like a second father to the 4 kids, and before long, he and Sarah bonded over it. This was at the same time Alois reconnected with one of his old friends, Hamish. This man had so many problems with money at the time, and Alois invited him and his son to move in with them until Hamish got more money. Apart from bringing 2 more people into a 6-people home, Alois was reportedly physically abusive to Sarah. Sarah was becoming increasingly unhappy in her relationship and began confiding in Raymond that Alois was lazy, overly demanding, and at times violent. Raymond, on the other hand, confided in her how lonely he felt after the death of his wife. Within months, Sarah and Raymond went from confidants to platonic lovers to actual lovers. She would secretly expose to Raymond when Alois wasn't looking. That's right, with the kids in the house. And when this wasn't enough anymore, Sarah and Raymond began sleeping together, most of the time under a secret bridge. Sarah became passionate and then obsessed with Raymond. In March 2013, she started writing him letters saying that Raymond gave her new meaning to life and that she wanted to marry him. Remember, she wasn't married to Alois, who she had 4 kids with. Of course, all Sarah had known was Alois. They had been together since she was 15, and now they had 4 children together, which meant she felt pretty stuck in an unhappy relationship. Instead of breaking up with Alois and returning to her mom, Sarah clung to Raymond as a sort of savior, but he wasn't going to be her savior for long. In May 2013, Sarah found out she was pregnant. This time, she knew it was Raymond's. She was pretty excited about it and told Raymond as soon as she found out. Raymond, well, he wasn't as happy. In fact, he gave Sarah an ultimatum. She had 3 weeks to leave Alois and start afresh with him. Sarah weighed her options, sticking with what she knew, a boyfriend she was unhappy about and her 4 children, or leaving this life and starting a new one with a man 27 years her senior and her unborn baby. None of these options seem ideal at first glance. Who would want to leave their children with an abusive father? However, Sarah chose the latter, but she wasn't sure how to get rid of Alois yet.
Could have just packed up and left with the kids. The other kids. She was having a relationship with an older man who could have supported her.
As obvious as this sounds, for some reason, simply breaking up with Alois wasn't an option for Sarah. She wanted him out. One opportunity came around towards the beginning of June 2013. Alois had picked up on Sarah's cheating, and their fights were getting worse and worse. One night, Alois was literally Sarah by her hair through the hallway, when Sarah managed to escape and quickly texted Raymond to call the police. But when the police arrived at their doorstep, Sarah had changed her mind. She apologized for wasting the police's time and sent them away. This is not unlike many abuse victims, who are either afraid of getting their partner in trouble or getting themselves in trouble after escalating the issue with the police. Raymond was angry at Sarah calling this off. This was the perfect way to get rid of Alois. Or was it? That's when Raymond came with another plan, just as Alois's mom, Zonia, was going on holiday. Raymond had a big stash of sleeping pills that his wife used to take before she passed away. He crushed them up and presented his plan to Sarah. She was to put crushed pills into Alois's food to get him into a deep sleep. Then, Raymond would come and take care of the rest. Raymond never told Sarah what he meant by taking care of the rest. In fact, when Sarah asked for details, he said it was best if she didn't know all the details. Nevertheless, she went through with the plan. So on the evening of July 28th, Sarah made Alois the easiest food to hide sleeping pills in: mashed potatoes. Alois ate the whole lot, and before long, he was in a very drowsy state. This was when Sarah and Raymond started exchanging messages.
Okay, still waiting for it to drop off. All kids sleeping. Wish it would hurry up and work.
Sarah was saying Alois drops soon. And Raymond was asking Sarah if she was sure she switched the security cameras off.
And they were still planning in that last hour or so. Have you left the door open? Have you turned the security cameras off? Have you left towels on the bed for me?
Meanwhile, Alois's friend Hamish came home with his son Peyton and saw Alois in the state he was in. Hamish was more concerned than Alois himself though, who said he probably just took too many painkillers. Alois crawled upstairs to sleep. At 2 a.m., he was out, and Sarah prepared some towels for Raymond and texted him to come over, adding, "I need Hamish and Peyton to go to sleep. Nothing is getting in the way of tonight." Sarah went out into the hallway and kept a close lookout. Remember, there were 5 children in the house, plus Hamish. At one point, she even checked on Hamish to make sure he was asleep. It's still unclear how Raymond murdered Alois in his bedroom, but once he did it, he wrapped him in the bed sheets and swiftly got out to his car with him. Raymond was out for a fair bit of time, but at one point he came back to the house and asked Sarah to come help him lift the body. That's right, Sarah helped Raymond lift her ex-lovers off the ground and into the car. That's when Sarah stayed home and Raymond left with the body in his car. He also took Alois's key belongings with him, his phone, his cigarettes. He wanted to make it look like Alois left the house on his own accord.
Didn't say where he was going He didn't say where he was taking him.
At first, no one batted an eyelid at Alois's disappearance. The next morning, after facilitating her boyfriend's death, Sarah went to the shops and bought new bedding. The rest of the family was used to Alois going away for a day or two, so the next 2 days were business as usual at Sarah's residence. But Hamish was texting Alois more and more as he was getting no reply. The third day, he asked Alois to just text that he's okay.
And sent him a message saying, look man, just let me know you're okay. If you don't want anybody else to know where you are, I won't say anything. No response.
Meanwhile, Sarah and Raymond were using these extra days to get their stories straight. They knew police would eventually get involved, and they wanted to tell them the same story and have answers to every possible question. 5 days after Alois's disappearance, his mom, Zonia, came back from holiday together with his sister, and they were both very concerned about her son. As they were talking about going to the police, Sarah and Raymond went there first to make Sarah look like the innocent, worried girlfriend. When Sarah reported Alois missing, the police asked her about Alois's life and potential dangers. Sarah told the police about the motorcycle gang and how they might have come for Alois in the end. The Rebels Outlaw Gang had a history of murder, but the police checked Alois's phone records and found no conversation between him and the gang for over 2 years. Also, Alois was 400 miles away from Newcastle. It was thus highly unlikely that the gang had come for him. There was something else off for the police. Sarah claimed Alois had been abducted in the middle of the night from their house, but there were 7 or 8 people in their house at that time. So how come no one heard or saw anything? The next day, the police came to Sarah's house and looked for clues. They found Alois's wallet, the one detail Raymond left out when packing his phone and tobacco. So the conclusion was there was no way Alois could have left his family for good without taking his money. The police thus came with 3 persons of interest for the case: Hamish, Raymond, and Sarah herself. They were brought in for questioning, including Hamish, who didn't have a clue what had happened.
How did you break the news to your family that you were a suspect in a murder?
I just blatantly let them know Alois he's gone, he's dead. He has been murdered and I'm a suspect.
Sarah and Raymond told their stories straight, but something came out during the interviews. They were having an affair. Apparently, Raymond had saved Sarah in his phone under a special name.
What was the name that you put on your phone for Sarah?
Hot, sexy, yummy mummy.
With this information, the police were certain that they were the main suspects, as they had a motive to get rid of Alois. The police immediately confiscated Sarah and Raymond's phones and sent a forensics team to their houses.
Further information about what actually transpired here, we done some forensic testing with the Forensic Services Group and located a droplet of blood in the crack in the driveway.
Finally, the team found a drop of blood and the DNA matched Alois's. Now the police knew they had a murderer to deal with.
Brother and a friend came out and said, mate, Sarah's been charged with murder. Then it hit me.
On August 19th, 3 weeks after Alois's disappearance, a fisherman called the police. He was out fishing as usual when he noticed a bedsheet floating in the river. The police immediately took DNA samples from the bedsheet and they found dog hair that matched Raymond's dog. They put 2 and 2 together and figured out Raymond was transporting Alois wrapped in the bedsheet in his car where his dog had been. The police checked out Raymond's car trunk, and this was a museum of evidence for the case. Dog hairs, Alois's, and even an empty sleeve of sleeping pills. Raymond had not done his homework. At the same time, police were looking at Sarah and Raymond's phones when they discovered all the texts they exchanged after Sarah had put sleeping pills in Alois's mashed potatoes. During one of the many police interviews, the investigator showed Sarah a transcript of her texts to Raymond that night. He asked her what she meant by, "I can't wait for the pills to kick in," to which she replied, "You know what I meant." She went on to say how she got crushed sleeping pills from Raymond, put them in Alois's mashed potatoes, then waited for him to fall asleep.
Mark gave me sleeping tablets.
Mike gave you his sleeping tablets.
I don't know if they were his or whose they were.
What'd you do with those sleeping tablets?
Gave them to Alois.
Why did you do that?
put him to sleep.
But she ended her story there. She said she knew nothing of what followed, as the police insisted with questions about her motive. Sarah cracked and said she never thought Raymond would hurt Alois. She just wanted to scare him off. Although Sarah talked, Raymond kept denying everything.
We found a large quantity of in the rear boot of your car. Do you understand that?
So I've been told, yes.
Okay. Is there anything you can tell me as to how that got into your
I
vehicle?
have no idea.
And that was the end of the case. The police could finally arrest the two for the murder of Alois Rez. They followed CCTV footage showing Raymond's car the night of Alois's disappearance, but found Raymond driving through several towns. And no footage shows him stopping anywhere or taking anything out of the trunk. Alois's location is still unknown. The information given to the judges was pretty straightforward, so the conclusion went as follows. Sarah was not responsible for the murder or for the disposing of the body. However, she facilitated everything Raymond did. Raymond's sentence was 33 years with a minimum of 24, but somehow he appealed it and managed to get a lower sentence, 25 with a minimum of 18. Sarah was initially given 10 years and 8 months in jail, with a minimum of 8 years. She was charged with murder. The jury had cleared her of the more serious charge of murder on the bias of substantial mental impairment. After an appeal, her sentence was reduced to 8 years in jail, with a minimum of 5 years. Justice Peter Johnson noted her early offer to plead guilty to manslaughter and her assistance to authorities, including a letter she wrote to Roth asking where he dumped Alois's body. Johnson said, her offense is of a very grave kind, but it is to be understood in the unusual and extreme circumstances which then existed in her life. He described Alois as a tormentor and explained that Sarah tried in a very wrongful way to dispose of him so that she could have a better life. Raymond was the criminal mastermind who abused Sarah's trust and led her into a corner. However, Sarah was responsible for what she did, and now both of them must pay the price. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to watch our other ones, and before you leave, why not give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.